Okay, good afternoon, good morning. My name is Mario Sanchez. I'm part of the Sumo Learn team, and today we're going to be focusing on using Sumo Logic. So as you guys know, this session, you probably went to this site in order to register for it, and you went here to virtual live courses. You notice that this is the second of 3 courses. So yesterday we ran through Sumo Logic Quick Start, and I recognized quite a few names from that session. Today we're going to dive deeper. We're going to go and find out, we're going to learn of a few advanced operators. We're going to learn about not just how to create alerts, but how to create meaningful alerts. We're going to go a little bit deeper and see a few more of the options that are available to us. But more interestingly as well, or equally interesting, I should say, I'm going to prepare you for certification. As a matter of fact, let me go to this tab right here, and you'll notice that for this level 2 certification, which this webinar prepares you for, there are some hands-on labs for you to walk through. I'm actually going to open that document, and I'm going to be running some of the labs right off of that document as well, so that you can try it out. And as I said before, you have access to the exact same data that I will be using through this document. Oops, sorry about that. I accidentally clicked mail. You'll be using this same exact document to prepare, and the same exact data that is in here for that. All right. So with that said, I'm going to try to get you to that certification level of a power user, and we're going to talk a little bit about a unified solution for logs and metrics. So we call it monitoring and troubleshooting. I won't show you the demo again because I walked through it yesterday, but I'm just going to review it for the newbies that are on the call. We'll talk about a tool set of basic and advanced analytics. I showed you some of the basic operators. I want to show you some more of the advanced ones today and how you can use those. We'll talk about how to start making Sumo work for you. So it's great that you can go in and create searches, but how do you make Sumo be the one who's alerting you? And we're going to do this through dashboards. We're going to do this through alerts. I'll talk briefly about some peer use cases, and I'll point you to some of these, which are great references for when you're starting to do your use cases. And then we'll talk about next steps. Where do you go from here? So as I mentioned yesterday, there's a training environment available for you guys. I would highly encourage you to try the labs, especially because they prepare you for the certifications, for the certification questions as you go to the next level as well. Very, very quick review of the basics. Yesterday, I walked you through a demo. I walked you through a demo of how you can receive an alert, or you can look at a dashboard that has a lot of red going on, and you know that something is happening in your environment. So you're essentially monitoring, and you identify some sort of critical event going on. You go into Sumo and you use your metrics to start identifying the what is happening, meaning think of it as the symptoms. What's going on in my environment? But the interesting thing that I showed you yesterday, and we'll get a little chance through labs today to see a little bit more of this, is how do I go from looking at what is happening, what are the symptoms, to identifying why something is happening? And the answers are in the logs, right? The logs are telling us, the logs are very verbose, and they tell us exactly what's going on and how we can, and why something is happening. So even though I won't go through the demo today, again, just wanted to point out that we're looking at that as an end goal, the ability to create these dashboards and these alerts so that we can get Sumo to work for us. Okay, high level again, we saw this yesterday, but this is broken, or the Sumo Logic data flow is broken into 3 areas. Data collection, which we won't cover again today. We cover that tomorrow. For those of you who are administrators, we go into data collection tomorrow in our webinar. But we're going to talk about searching and analyzing, visualizing, and monitoring. So creating, at the end of the day, creating alerts and dashboards that help you keep an eye and monitor and troubleshoot your data. We talked about the fact that we can collect just about anything from anywhere, whether it is a cloud-to-cloud integration or whether it is an installed collector in your environment as well. And last but not least, we talked about metadata. Every single message coming into Sumo Logic gets tagged with these metadata tags. And I can't stress enough how important source category is. Tomorrow, for those admins joining tomorrow, we talk about the best practices for your source category and how to create a source category that matches your data sources. Okay, so with that said, let's talk a little bit about parsing, searching and parsing your data. Yesterday, I showed you how to start searching using the metadata, how to search using your keywords, and just as a quick review, I prefer to show less slides and more of the application. So I'm going to go in here and just walk you through some examples. I'm going to open a new query, and I can do that from several places. I can do it here from the new log search, or I can just click here and say new log search. And by metadata, we mean any of these fields in here. So I can search by collector, I can search by source category. If I wanted to focus on a specific host, for example, I can search for host and look for someone. Here I have a host called LeBaron, and I can go and look for that data from that particular host. But as I mentioned before, more often than not, you're going to be using source category because your administrators will have devised or created a source category that is very meaningful to your data. So in short, you want to search for your source categories, or if source category or source categories, or if and you could do things like or source category, category equals labs Apache error. You could do this too, right? I could say bring me data from this or this, or probably more interesting is you could do that too, right? Remember yesterday I was mentioning how you can use wildcards to search for different metadata fields. In this case, lab Apache access and lab Apache error. You would also want to use keywords. So the more you start filtering here at the top, the better. The first line is very key because the more you filter, the less stuff you're going to be sending down, the less results you're going to be sending down to the next lines. So in this case, I'm looking for all lab Apache access data that has the word Mozilla in it. And of course, you can imagine you can use ands, you can use ors, you can use and not Mozilla as well. So you could do that kind of stuff. So fairly simple to figure out. Similarly, you can use wildcards in here as well, right? Okay, so you want to use your metadata, you want to use your keywords. We talked about LiveTail yesterday. What is LiveTail? LiveTail is the ability to look for data. As a matter of fact, I'm going to just copy these and cheat and look at it as the data is coming in. So this is similar to you tailing a log file. The beauty of LiveTail is that it allows me to tail across multiple hosts, because I can, if all the hosts were set up, if all my Apache web servers were set up with this source category, I'm getting the data from all my different hosts. If I wanted to focus on a very particular source host, I could do the same thing. I could say this lab Apache access, and I could say it has to be from source host equals ABC, right? So that would restrict it to just this host for source category such and such. So you can get pretty creative here in terms of how you want to search for that data. And LiveTail, of course, allows you to scroll up, scroll down, look for the specific things that you're looking for. You can highlight words if you wanted to as well. Maybe you can highlight the word 404 and the word error, and look at those highlighted as they're coming through. Now, this tool is not meant to do full-on analytics. This is just showing me the data as it's coming in. As a matter of fact, Sumo displays this data even before it actually goes and indexes all that stuff, because it's trying to serve you the data with the least delay possible. So if you were to find that you actually have a lot of 404s and you actually want to start counting the number of 404s you have versus the number of 200s, then you want to go back to your search screen in here. And in that case, you would be able to do things like count by status code. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I just wanted to show you this example. This kind of query, count by status code, you will not be able to do in LiveTail, because in LiveTail, you're really not querying the data. All you're saying is, show me the data that is out there for this particular source category, or for this particular source host, or for this particular source, right? You're just dumping that data out there. Okay, one other thing that is worth mentioning about LiveTail is that we also have a, let me just open the help menu. We also have a command line interface for LiveTail. CLI for LiveTail. And for those of you who were on the call yesterday, I probably showed the exact screens where I took you here to see that you can download it from GitHub. You'll have to do a little bit of handshake when it comes to an access key and access ID. But then once installed, you can run commands like this one. You can say, all right, run LiveTail. I want to find out source category lab Apache access, and then pipe those results to your grep command, for example, and then even drop that into a out.txt file if that's what you're looking for. All right. Okay, so let's get back to this. So remember, from a search perspective, you want to use your metadata. You want to use your keywords. 95% of the time, you can search using your metadata and keywords. For example, if here is a query that is not necessarily a bad query, but not necessarily the best query out there. I could just search for all my logs for the word error. And even though it might be meaningful, that might turn out to be quite a lot of stuff. What I might want to do instead is perhaps I want to look for the errors in a very particular I might want to look for errors for anything that has to do with security. That might be a much better security. That might be a much better query in here, saying, okay, maybe I don't have anything. Actually, let me get rid of this since I don't know exactly what the. So anything that has a source category that has the word security in it, for example, OS Linux security, or I assumed I would have like snort data out here. But this, you see how I start restricting my query using my metadata to pull out messages that are a little more meaningful. Yes, it's true. Every so often, you might have to run a query like this one, and that's okay. But as much as you can, start restricting your queries with the right data. All right, so we talked about metadata, we talked about keywords, we talked about LiveTail. Yesterday, I showed you how to parse queries as well, and just for kicks, I'll show you one very quickly right now. So I'm going to go to source category equals labs Apache accesses again. And if you notice, let's just choose those that have the word Mozilla. What you'll see is I get a whole bunch of messages here. As a matter of fact, about 64,000 messages, and I can see a lot of the data in it. I can see the verb itself, the action, I should say. I could see the status code. I can see the size. But if I wanted to start counting some of these fields, I would have to parse this data so that I can give it some meaning. So I'm going to show you, again, this is a review from yesterday, but just very quickly, how you can do some parsing. I'm going to do this one pretty quick since it's a review, but this is the easy way. I can say, all right, anything between the word get and the word HTTP, I want to extract that and I want to call it the URL. And anything after that, that's going to be my status code. Status code. And anything after that is going to be my size, and you get the point, right? I'm just using this message as an example so that I can extract fields from it. And the reason I can get away with that is because all the Apache access messages look exactly the same. They have the same format. So I can say you will always find this kind of format. And when you do, when you find this pattern, when you find this exact format, I want you to pull out these fields from it. So if I run that, you'll see that I'm going to have quite a few fields pulled out. The message is still here on my right-hand side, but then I've pulled out user agent, I've pulled out URL, status code, size, and so on. You get the point. And why would I want to do that? Because I can start using those fields. I can do now a true, let's say, count by status code, which is what I had shown you before, except that I jumped the gun. So now I can count by status code because status code is one of the fields that is in here. Okay, I took it a step further yesterday, and I showed you that you don't have to be parsing every single time. What you will want to do is you will want to create what we call field extraction rules. Let me show you how to create a field extraction rule. I'm going to go here under Manage Data. I'm going to go under Settings, and one of the fields, one of the things that is available to me here is field extraction rules. So field extraction rules, as the name suggests, is a rule that allows you to extract fields. Actually, let me edit it so you can see how this was edited or put together. Here's a field called Apache J. And what this is saying is, listen, every single message that comes in with a source category of something Apache Access, I want you to apply this parsing statement to it. So what's going to happen is anything that comes in is going to get parsed and indexed, which is fantastic because then I don't have to do the parsing on every single time that I'm running a query. As a matter of fact, I'll show you that if I go back to my query, which was here, I can run this same count by status code because that field extraction rule was already doing the parsing. Therefore, this query here works because status code is already a field that is being parsed by a field extraction rule. If you want to find out what fields are being parsed by the field extraction rule, there's two ways to find out. One is, obviously, you can go to the field extraction rule itself, and you can see here the fields that are getting extracted. The second way to do it, which is a little easier, especially if you're building a query, is just do a quick search on the data itself first. Just say, give me source category lab Apache Access. You're going to get the raw messages. But let me get a little bit more real estate here. But in addition to the raw messages that you get, you're also going to get this field here called the field browser. Field browser is pretty cool because it has the fields themselves that have been parsed. So there's IP address, there's URL, there is status code, and so on. The other cool thing about this is that it actually pulls out, not only does it pull them out and extract them for you, it gathers all these statistics on it. You'll notice that if I click on status code, it shows me that about 72% of my messages are 200s, and about 0.84 of my messages are 500s. So if this is production, this is looking pretty decent because that's what I expected, right? I would want to see more 200s. And it's even giving me some drill downs at the bottom. Let's look at this middle one. It's saying that it's going to give me trends over time. And for those of you who were on the call yesterday, which I believe is the majority, doesn't this query look very familiar? This is what we built yesterday, remember? This allowed us to say, okay, give me all the data from Lab Apache Access. I want to time slice that data. So if I was pulling, let's say, 60 minutes worth of data, and I say I want 10 buckets, that means each bucket is going to be 6 minutes. I could have also, instead of specifying number of buckets, I could have said 6 minutes, in which case it's going to be 10 buckets. Or I could have said, I want 5-minute buckets, in which case I'm going to have 12 buckets themselves. I could have said, I want 1-minute buckets, and I'm going to get 60 minutes worth of buckets in there. And then what I'm doing is I'm counting the number of status codes I have per time slice and per status code. And then I'm transposing it. If you guys remember, transpose allowed me to turn a list into a table so that it's a lot easier to read. And that's how, let me just run this query with a time slice of 5 minutes. And what you'll notice is I am going to end up with 12 buckets. Let me show you how to expand the results. There we go. So I end up with 12 buckets, actually 13 because we span another bucket, not completely, but just a little. And then I can see the number. These are all counts. So for 304s, for this time slice at 9:35 for 304, I had 3,452 messages that have a status code of 304. And that's how you go about reading this, right? So you notice that pulling out those field extraction rules or creating those field extraction rules make it a lot easier because you have a lot of data beforehand. All right, similar to yesterday, since I recognize most names, feel free to ask any questions that you have through the Q&A. If not, we will have time later after this session to respond to questions as well. Okay, so excuse me. So I showed you that you want to use metadata, you want to use keywords, you can use livetail, you can parse during the query itself, or you can build field extraction rules for that. I would highly recommend that as soon as possible, you start working with your administrator to create some field extraction rules. But let me show you a few examples of some of the parsing options that are out there as well. By the way, if this is face-to-face, we would break, try some of the hands-on labs. We don't have that luxury because this is remote, but I would highly, highly, highly encourage you guys to try it out. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you some of the parsing options using those labs. So here are the labs themselves. Here is how you would access the same training environment that I'm using. And you notice that some of the first labs are super simple, right? How to use metadata and keywords. So this is very similar to what I was just showing you, how to use LiveTail. But let's talk about a few of the options that are available to you. There's some of the parsing options in here. I want to talk about, let's talk about node drop. Node drop's a good one. And I'm going to show you node drop by cheating and copying the result first. And then I'm going to go drop it into our query. So let's close this one. Let's close some stuff here so we have a clean query. All right, let's start from here. Okay, so let's look at the Apache access error. I'm sorry, the Apache error data. And what you'll see is that the Apache error data, as shown down here, has slightly different formats for the different errors. So there are some messages that say error, and then mod log SQL, and then some sort of message, as you see here, right? There are other messages, say like this one, that have the word error, but then they have a client IP address, and then they have some sort of a message there as well. What if we wanted to find out what's the error message in these kinds of messages? What's the mod log SQL error message? But we wanted to find out the IP address from these kinds of messages, right? So different messages, you want to pull out different things from them. So the first thing that you would probably think about is, okay, let me do the parsing on the client, the one that has a client IP. So I'm going to say, look for anything that has brackets, the word client, and then something, and extract that something that ends with a bracket, and that's going to become my client IP. I'm going to not use the node drop first, right? So what it does is it runs the query, finds out this pattern in your log messages, and then extracts the client IP. But what it also does by default is any other message that does not follow that pattern gets dropped. So the problem is now we can't look at the other messages so that we can extract more content from it. So what we can do is we can add a node drop. This is an option for your parsing. If you say node drop, it says, okay, great. For those where I do find the pattern, like here, I'm going to parse it out. And there it is. Here it's parsed out over here. But for those that I don't find the pattern, like message in row number 2 and row number 3, for those, I'm going to keep them. Of course, there's nothing for me to parse out, but I'm just going to keep the message. So that's what the node drop allows you to do. And then from there, you can have a second parse statement that is going to parse out the message itself. So now notice this. I have some messages where I've parsed out the client IP, and I have other messages where I've parsed out the message itself. So you can see how I didn't get anything dropped. And of course, then I can do whatever other calculations I want. And I'm going to just show you one last operator called the isBlank operator. We have an isBlank, is empty, is null. But I can say, all right, now only show me those messages where isBlank client IP, where client IP is blank. So of course, it's going to drop the other ones and just show you the ones that have a message itself. Okay. No questions, so let me move on. Let's talk about the parse field. Here's a good one. Again, I'm going to cheat and try to see if there's data in here so I can show you this message. But the parse, just going to dump it in here. Let's see if I get some results here to begin with. Yeah, we do. Okay, let me first and foremost comment these out, and I'll walk you through what the field option does. So first, I'm searching for only those messages from GitHub where there is a committer. So I want to see who's committing messages in my GitHub repository, right? So I can see committer, I can see a name, I can see an email address, and all that good stuff. Great. So now I'm going to parse out the email address. I'm going to say, find this pattern, find the word email followed by a colon, and grab anything right after that, and store that in a field called email. And there you go. Here I have a new field called email that has that stuff parsed out, right? I can use the parse field option to say, I want to do additional parsing to a field that has already been parsed. So I'm saying parse field email. I'm going to grab anything in front of the @ sign and everything after the @ sign and store it under user and domain. And then I can say count by users. And then I can even say I want to see only the top 5 users by count. I could even say also, well, listen, I actually only want those where, let's say, domain. I don't know if I have any data like that, but we'll find out. Or domain equals Sumo Logic, for example, logic.com. So if I only want to find out my Sumo committers, oh, I do. There we go. So I don't care for any of the other domains. I only want those that have a domain of sumologic.com. And I want to parse those out. I want to count by those users. And I want to show the top 5 for that kind of stuff. And again, remember, from here, it's pretty easy to go into a table, into a pie chart, or whatever you want from here as well. All right. So I'm showing you, let me show you one last option from a parsing perspective. And this one's called Parse Multi. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cheat. And I'm just going to go grab the stuff here and run a new query. All right. Parse Multi. Parse Multi gives you, actually, before I do that, let me run this query. So I'm going to look at snort data. And as several of you might know, this is security data that it tells me about breaches, attempted information leak. As a security engineer, I want to keep eye on my data in here, right? So what if I want to parse out IP addresses? So look for this pattern and store it in a field called IP address. Well, the problem there is that, excuse me, I might have several IP addresses that I want to pull. Give me just a second so I can have a sip of water. Excuse me. Okay, I'm back. So if you notice in here, I have quite a few different IP addresses. I have this one, and I have this one. So if I were to just say, listen, go ahead and parse IP addresses and pull them out, I'm going to get rid of the multi for now. It's only going to find the first one and say, okay, found it, I'm done. You get the point, right? But if I have several fields in a message, I can use the multi. Let's say that I had several users within a message, or several email addresses within a message, or in this case, several IP addresses within a message. What it does is it parses out each one. So if you notice, this message in line 1 is the exact same message in line 2. So the messages themselves are the same ones, but it's parsed out the first IP address here and the second IP address here for you, so that you can have all IP addresses being parsed out as you need to. All right, great. That sounds pretty good. No questions. Let me move forward. So like I said, you want to make sure that you're searching your data with metadata, with keywords. You can use LiveTail as well to look at the data live. You start parsing your data, but then you want to make sure that you're using those field extraction rules and start really getting all those fields extracted so that you don't have to take care of them later on. We covered some of these simple analytics, so I won't go through a lot of them. I think you now know the syntax for doing this kind of stuff, right? You use the metadata and keywords, you parse, and you can use some filtering. Here's a good example, right? This is saying source categories lab, Apache, Access, and Mozilla. Oops, what did I do there? There we go. Then I want to parse this pattern and extract a few fields from it. Again, if you set up field extraction rules, you wouldn't have to do this line. Then I can filter my data additionally, where status code matches 5-star. And then I can say, I want to count by status code, I want to sort it by count, and I want to limit it. So if you notice, what we're doing is we're filtering our data, then we parse it, then we filter it a little bit further, then we aggregate it in some format, in some form, and then we format it so that we can see it in a specific way that we want as well. From an aggregation perspective, we've got the basic stuff: the count, the sum, the average, the min, the max, the things that you would expect to see, right? From a conditional perspective, you could do things like if, or matches, or in, or filter. So this allows you to look for specific things within your messages. As a matter of fact, let me try to go find an example that has a few of these in here. Let me go back to this thing. Again, I'm going to cheat. Sounds like I've said that quite a lot today, but I just want to go find something that's already up and running so I don't have to go and rebuild it again. Let's grab this one. No, let's grab the one at the bottom. Let's grab this one, which I'm going to go through these later on in more detail. But here's a good example. If you notice, I am looking for Lab Apache access. Let's say that I wasn't even looking for these particular status codes. I was just looking for Lab Apache access. Then I time slice those messages, and then I'm saying, if status code matches to something, then I want to create a new field that has a 1 in that field and a 0 if not. So you notice I'm using the if operator, I'm using the matches operator to do this kind of stuff, right? I could have also said if status code in, and then I would have to specify to, let's say that there were 200s. Let's say that we had, I'm just making stuff up, 208 and 222s. Oops, my comma is wrong. 222. So you could use the in operator as well for this kind of stuff. Then 1, otherwise 0, and you get the point. That's how this works in there. So you have some conditional operators, and then from a formatting perspective, that means, okay, great, I've got my results, but I probably want to show them in a very specific format because I want to plot them, because I want to graph them, because I want to use them in a bar chart, because I want to look at percentages. So there's additional formatting operators that you will want to use. I mentioned this yesterday, but I'm going to point it out again. If you go to your Home tab under Learn, there are the tutorials that I suggested you do, but there's also a cheat sheet that points you to all the whole different operators that are out there. I don't have the ability to go through all of them today because there are way too many, but you notice that they're broken by function. So here's my parsing operators. There's a parse anchor that I showed you today, parse regex, key value, CSV, JSON. So if you're parsing JSON formatted files, guess what? You use this operator. CSV and so on, right? Split, XML. Here's some aggregating operators: average, count, the ones that are the basic ones. But you know, we have a few others that are a little more specific for log and metric management, and I'll show you those in just a second as well. Right? But feel free to keep an eye on this log operators cheat sheet because it's going to be pretty handy as you start creating your stuff. All right. So again, here's where I would throw you into the hands-on labs. Let's go grab a couple just so that you can see some examples in there as well. So I'm going to go to the labs themselves. It's suggesting you try some of the conditional operators. The good thing about these labs is that the answers are here. I would prefer you don't just copy and paste as I'm doing. I would prefer that you read this, try to figure it out on your own. But if you cannot, the answers are here, and it's pretty easy to follow for those as well. All right, but here's some examples. Let me make this just a little bit bigger for you. Here are some examples of using the if operator. Here's an example of using the matches, which is kind of the same one that I just showed you. Here's an example of using the filter operator as well. This is a good one, plotting clients on a map. Let's grab this one and show you how to do this one. I think I'm moving over to the advanced operators, but that's okay. This is a good one to show. So I'm going to go back to my query, and I'm just going to plop this here. And what this one is doing, let's walk you through it. It says, okay, go to source category equals Lab Apache access. That's great. I know how to do that. Then look for a pattern where there's something followed by a space, by a dash, by a space, and a dash, right? So look for that pattern. And if you find that, grab whatever that something is and store that under client IP. Let's take a look at the messages themselves. I'm going to go and open a different tab with that. If you just look at the messages, it looks like that was right. You have something and then space dash space dash. So what it did is said, look for this pattern and just grab anything that is in there and store it as client IP. So let's go back to the query. Oops, it was this one here. There it is. So it parsed that stuff, stores it in client IP, and then it's using the lookup operator. And the lookup operator says, all right, I'm going to give you client IP. So where IP equals client IP, and I want you to look at this geo default database. I want you to search for latitude and longitude. So this geo default is a service that we provide to you. It's absolutely free. And we populate it right now with a tool called MaxMind, but I believe we're moving to another tool, or giving you the two options. But in short, what it's allowing you to do is it's allowing you to search for latitude and longitude for those client IPs. And then I'm counting by latitude and longitude, and then I'm just sorting by count so that I could see the ones with the most IP addresses. And if I run that query, there it is, latitude and longitude for all those IP addresses. Cool thing is that I can then use this little map icon, and I can map where all my hits are coming from. So it's as easy as that. You probably saw some fancy maps that were showing all the different hits. That's the query behind it. It's right here. This is how I go about it. I just use the lookup operator. I use up this service, and I pop in the IP address, and it's going to find the latitude and the longitude for me. Let me show you let me go to the help menu and look for that operator, geolookup operator. Here we go, geolookup operator. It shows you how to use it. It gives you some examples. It gives you an idea of how the map looks. Look, there's more stuff that I can get, not just latitude and longitude. I can get country code, country name, region, city, postal code, and so on. Let's do that. Let's just copy and paste. I'm going to grab all these other fields all the way to metric code, right? You notice the syntax is the same, from geo default on IP address and so on. I'm going to grab that. I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to go back to our query, and I'm going to say, all right, don't just look up for latitude and longitude. Look for everything. And also, obviously, count by everything. And if I run that query and look at my table, I should get results for all those. And there you go. As simple as that. Now, with that IP address, I can find out the country code, the country name, region, city, postal code, and all that good stuff. If I wanted to focus on a particular country, let's say that I only wanted France. I want to see hits that are coming from France. I'm hoping that most of you are already thinking of how to do that. I think it's pretty straightforward. You would just put a where clause here, right? Oops, where country code equals, and you just specify FR, which is the country code. And there, we should only get results for France. It looks like they're all coming from one same latitude and longitude. I have a lot of hits. If I look at the map, if all goes well, I should see a map that focuses just on France, right? As you see here. And if I scroll out, since it was just one data point, it zoomed right into that. But as I'm zooming out, you're noticing that clearly it's focusing in France itself. All right, no questions. So let me move forward with this. Pretty straightforward, right, in terms of the operators that you have in here. Let's talk a little bit about advanced analytics. So this is what I wanted to get to today. So I want to walk you through a few advanced analytics operators, because these are going to become very, very handy for you as you continue to use Sumo in your organization. So the first thing is Outlier. I think I showed you this a little bit yesterday, but I still want to review it because it becomes a pretty interesting one. So I'm going to open some of the queries that I already have built. There we go. I'm going to open this one called Outlier. I'm going to open this, I'm going to open this other one called Predict. And while I'm at it, I'm going to open this other one called Log Reduce. Okay, so let's start with Outlier. What Outlier allows me to do, and let me run this query first, and then I'm going to come back and explain it for you. What Outlier does is, not only does it count the number of server errors, meaning how many 404s I have. Actually, this would be client errors, right? It counts the number of 404s, but it also creates all these other statistical measures for me. And the reason it does that is because it is calculating the standard deviation. So if I plot this, it looks something like this. And let me interpret first the results of this, and then I'll go back and explain the query itself. What this is showing me is, the blue line is showing me the number or my count of 404s, how many 404s I've had in the different time periods or time slices in here, right? So at 10 a.m., which is right here, I had a count of 241 404s in my data. Okay. What it's showing me as well with this light blue area or gray area around the line is, it's showing me standard deviations, what it thinks the standard deviation, what the standard deviation is at a particular point in time. And the way that it figures out a standard deviation is by looking at the previous data points and looking at where that line was in the previous data points to figure out what the standard deviation should be at a given point in time. And then the pink triangles here are any violation outside of that standard deviation, either above the standard deviation or below the standard deviation. All right, so far so good? So with that knowledge, let's talk a little bit about the outlier operator. So before we do, let's just walk through what we have up to here. Up to here, what we're saying is, listen, look for messages that are Apache Access that have a status code of 404. Then time slice by 1 minute, and then count all the status codes that I have, or count the number of messages, name it server error count. Let me just call it error count instead of server. Oops, my mouse just froze. Here, I'm going to switch my, I lost connection, connected again. Okay, here we go. Let me just call it server count, error count. So I'm doing a count of all my messages as error count by the time slice, and there it is. This is the very simple count of 404s by time slice, right? Then what I do is I say, okay, now let's use the outlier operator on that error count. Oof, again, I lost my mouse. Let me just switch here then. Okay. So outlier on that error count, and it's saying, and what these other operators here are doing is, the first one says, what is the window of how many messages do you want me to go back to find out what the standard deviation should be now? That's what the window is all about. Consecutive means how many times should you be outside of the standard deviation for me to alert you. The third one, threshold, says how many standard deviations. In this case, excuse me, we're choosing 2 standard deviations. And the last one, direction, just says, should I tell you of the violations above and below the standard deviation, or just above or just below? And in this case, if I put a plus minus, that means above and below. So if I look at what the line looks for that's exactly what it's doing, right? A threshold of 2. Let's change that threshold to like 4. And what's going to happen there is I'm going to have a bigger gray area or light blue area, and there's going to be a lot less violations. As a matter of fact, there's only 1, because now with a larger standard deviation threshold, I'm not outside of that standard deviation that often of that threshold. Okay, does this make sense? Hopefully, you guys are understanding this one. I see no questions, so let me move on to the next one. Predict. Predict is pretty straightforward. As the name says, it just forecasts stuff in the future. So in this case, I'm looking for my Live Apache Access, meaning all the messages that come against Live Apache Access. I am counting all those messages and giving it the name requests. I'm counting them by time slice. And then I'm saying, all right, now that you know what the requests are up to now, I want you to predict the next 10 points, the next 10 data points for 5M, meaning the next 50 minutes, or if I change this to 12, the next hour worth of time. And if I run that query, it's going to show me a few things. If I look at this in table format, let me scroll down just to show you. It is, oh, let me go to the end. It's showing me the requests themselves and then a prediction for what it thinks the values are going to be going forward for the next 12 data points, right? Remember I asked for 12 data points? And if I look at that in a line, it shows me the data now. For some reason, there was no data at a particular point in time. And it's showing me, that line is showing me a trend of prediction, how it thinks it's going. So if I had just launched a site, this is a good thing, because this is showing me that the number of hits is increasing steadily, and I'm trending upwards in the right way. If I'm looking at a queue of errors and I'm trying to remove errors from the queue, then this might not be good, because it looks like I'm getting more errors into my queue. So you get the point. Predict allows you to extend a prediction in the future. All right, the next one I want to show you is log reduce and log compare. So log reduce, for those of you who saw the demo, what log reduce allows me to do is to find a needle in a haystack. But the key thing here is that you might not even know what you're looking for. You might not even know what that needle looks like, yet you're trying to identify those patterns and find them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, I'm going to look for lab security snort data. So this is network intrusion data, and I'm trying to identify anything that is going on in there that seems a little odd, right? I'm sorry that I'm struggling with my mouse, but it just died on me here. All right. So if I look at my last, oops, it connected. Okay. So if I'm looking at the last 15 minutes worth of data, look at that. That's 1,258 messages. I could scroll through those messages. Actually, let's make it harder. Let's look for the last 60 minutes worth of data. Okay. So I'm looking at the last 60 minutes worth of snort data. This is security data. I want to find out if I have new breaches, if I have new leaks, if I have any attacks. As several of you might know, if I'm looking for a particular thing, I can just search for it. I can say leak, look for the word leak. I can search for the word attack. I can even search for the word Trojan horse if I wanted to. I can search for names and go find those messages in there, right? The problem comes if I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know why this happened here, but I'm just going to go back to 15 minutes for just a second. Oh, something seems to be going on in here. Give me just 1 second. Okay. So the problem is, what if I don't know what I'm looking for? I would have to sort through all these messages, in this case, 1,200 messages, to go and see if there's anything that looks odd or that I haven't seen before. So what I can do is I can hit log reduce. And what log reduce is going to do, which is pretty awesome, it's going to take those same 1,200 messages or 1,600 messages, whatever the number of messages is, and it's going to compile them into signatures. It's going to start aggregating them into these signatures that then allow me to easily sift through them. So I know that out of the 1,600 messages, half of them are this same format: attempted leak information. Of course, the IP address is different. The port might be different. The date might be different, and all those are variables in here. But I already knocked off half of the messages that I was looking for, so I don't care for those. Then it's saying that another 400 messages all are a web application attack of some sort, and they look something like this, right? So what it's allowing me to do is it's allowing me to classify this into just one page's worth of signatures and much more easily be able to go through these. So I can scroll down to the ones that are only happening a few times and look. Maybe I found something here that I hadn't been looking for before. I found a potentially bad traffic, SolarWinds IP scan attempt. I also found something that only happened once, an attempt user privilege gain. So I'm keeping an eye on those things that are not normal, that are happening less frequent, and I can even go and investigate. I can click on this, find out what this potential bad traffic is all about, click on it. It takes me to the message itself. So I'm now looking at the message. I now know the IP addresses that it was trying to go to from and go to, the port numbers and all that good stuff. Here's a pretty cool thing that I can do as well from this is I can, from here, decide, all right, I'm going to go and look for this lab security snort data. I'm going to look for the context of when this happened. Let me look for the data 1 minute before and 1 minute after, or let me look at all the log messages 5 minutes before, 5 minutes after, so I can find out what was going on right before this and what happened right after. And if I knew that it's not just, it was in a particular host that I care for, I can do the same thing for a host. I can say, just for this host, show me the data 5 minutes before and 5 minutes after as well. So this just allows you to do additional digging in and finding out what was going on in your environment. All right. So log reduce, pretty powerful, gives you the ability to look at or compress a lot of data into signatures so that you can easily identify that data. I'm going to show you another one that is pretty good. I'm going to go and pull that same snort data. It was called, what was it? Labs security, I think, snort. All right. So here it is again, same data. I'm pulling 15 minutes worth of the same lab security snort data. But in this case, what I'm going to do is, instead of running a log reduce, which will give me the signatures for this 15 minutes, I'm going to run a log compare. And you'll notice that it gives me different time frames. I'm just going to click the default, which is 24. Now, what log compare is doing right now, and pay attention to this because this is pretty key. It's running a log reduce now. So it's looking at the last 15 minutes worth of data and doing a log reduce on that and coming up with signatures. And then it's doing a log reduce 24 hours ago, and it's also doing a signature on that. And then it's coming back and saying, listen, Mario, here are all the signatures that I found today, right? For those 1,600 messages, you have all these different signatures. But on top of that, this particular signature, what you see here, which today happened 835 times the last 15 minutes, it's happening plus 1.4% more than it was happening 24 hours ago. So it seems like this signature happens a lot now, and it also happened a lot 24 hours ago because the difference doesn't seem to be that significant. However, let me go find something. Let's say this one, this web application attack signature, happened only 16 times this time around, which is about 30% less than it did 24 hours ago. Or maybe this one, look at this one. This one, my friend, happened 8 times today. This one called the SolarWinds IP scan attempt, potential bad traffic. That's an increase of 300% more than happened yesterday. So if I'm the security engineer, I'd be focusing on this right now. It looks like some new attack is coming up. I didn't see a whole lot of that happening yesterday, and now all of a sudden I'm seeing it creep up and start. And it's still pretty small. It's only 8 signatures for that. But you can imagine if I expand this to, rather than 15 minutes, to the last 24 hours, so the last 6 hours, I probably would see a lot more of those. And then I'm going to show you a couple of other things. Look at this one. This is all new altogether. This one says attempted user privilege gain. This means there is one signature of that. It wasn't happening last 24 hours ago. And then the last one down here, an interesting one as well, says here is another signature, this one down here, which was happening 24 hours ago, but now is completely gone. I don't see the signature anymore. So perhaps I now put in place something to stop that attack, and that signature is gone altogether for you. So you can see how this becomes very, very powerful as you're trying to compare data from now to data in the past. And you notice that I could do it by default. It's 24 hours. It could be 7 days. It could be custom as well. So I could choose a different time period. And here's where it gets pretty cool. I could even compare different targets. I could compare my lab security snort to my prod security snort data, right? Let's say that I'm about to move some code in. I want to compare my code in dev or in labs to my code in prod before I send it over. All right, so log compare is a pretty powerful tool to allow you to compare data, large volumes of data, to now to large volumes of data in the past by first reducing them to signatures and then comparing those signatures one to the other. All right. Any questions so far? Easy enough? Okay, that's pretty good. So with some of those advanced analytics, again, we switch over to the labs and try a few of those. I will highly encourage you that you try those labs because they're definitely going to allow you to try these out and understand them on your own. But let me see if I can go grab some of those labs for you to try some stuff. So here's, oh look, actually the lab is also using Lab Security Snort. So a lot of the stuff that I just went through, you'll probably find those similar labs as you're trying to go through this, which will give you some experience as well. Here's one that's using the transaction operator to analyze related log metrics. And what it does is it allows you to create a chart showing you the flow. In this particular case, it's an example of you have a website and that website has different states. When people put stuff in the cart, when they actually confirm it, they give you the shipping info. So how many people went from cart to shipping info to confirmation to eventually ordering and shipping that order, right? So, and you can see that kind of trend as you go through an exercise like this. Okay, let me switch gears a little bit here. I've been talking a lot about logs, and the idea behind logs is it allows you to do a lot of the troubleshooting. But what about the metrics themselves? What about the metrics that you're keeping an eye ahead of time? So as I mentioned yesterday, metrics can be brought in from three main sources. The first one is host metrics, and that's pretty straightforward. Your CPU, your network, your I/O. So we want to keep an eye on the metrics of your hosts. And by the way, as you can see here, it doesn't matter what the host is. We can grab those metrics. And it's pretty easy if you already have collectors in it, because you just bring in the metrics through the same collector. If you're an AWS workshop, guess what? We can bring in those metrics as well through AWS CloudWatch. AWS sends all its metrics to CloudWatch, and then we can grab them from there. And I'll show you in a little bit that we have quite a few apps, quite a few out-of-the-box content for a lot of these metrics as well. And then the last one is Graphite compatible. So if you have a lot of metrics that are stored in StatsD or CollectD, we can grab those Graphite formatted metrics into Sumo Logic as well. Excuse me, I talked about out-of-the-box content, so let me just show you some of that stuff as well. So here I'm going to have to move my computer because my mouse is not working. So let me switch over to my laptop and try to help you, try to continue from here. So what do I mean with out-of-the-box content? For those of you who were on the call yesterday, let me just close some of these here to make it a little easier. You saw me go into the app catalog. And what is the app catalog? Essentially, the app catalog has a whole bunch of out-of-the-box content. So we have seen enough customers pull out data from AWS CloudTrail. We have a pretty good idea what they're trying to monitor in AWS CloudTrail. We have a pretty good idea how they troubleshoot normally in AWS CloudTrail. Therefore, we built a whole bunch of dashboards that allow you to do exactly that. You notice that if you install this app, you will get a console logins for AWS CloudTrail, network security, operations, overview, S3 public object, and so on. Yeah, it's true. You might not get 100% of what you're looking because every single customer, every single user has very specific needs, but this will definitely give you 90, if not 95% of what you're looking for. And by the way, if you don't want to add it ahead of time, you can always preview some dashboards. This screen might be a little too small for you right now, but if you are in your own computer, you can see what are there's some screenshots of the dashboards that would actually get installed so that you can see if this is something that is meaningful for you as well. All right, so in that same vein, we have apps for tons of AWS logs and metrics. So for example, here is AWS ELB metrics, right? Here is an app that has both logs and metrics for the Elastic load balancing. Here's the same thing for Lambda. Here's Amazon DynamoDB, Amazon ECS, GuardDuty, and so on. So these are operators that these are apps that allow you to grab content for that. One of the ones that I think I mentioned, let's see if I find host metrics. Well, let me just do this. Let's type host met. Here we go. So let's say that you already had a collector in one of your servers, and that collector was pulling in the logs for that server. Let's say it was a web server and was pulling in your Apache Access logs and whatnot. But you also wanted to bring in the metrics for that particular host. It's pretty easy because that collector already sits in there. All you have to do is turn this on and install this dashboard in here. As a matter of fact, I think I have it installed already. Let's go see in here. I'm going to go into my instance library, go to apps. And do I have host metrics installed? Yeah, I think I do. I don't know if this is the right one, if it has data, but we'll find out in just a second. So let's look at overview and see if there's any data attached. Oh, there isn't. Bummer. Okay, that's all right. No worries. I'm going to just show you through the app catalog quickly here. So if I were to add this to the library, I can get dashboards that show me, oof, this is pretty small for you guys. But here we go. I can see overall average CPU. I could see total free system memory. I can see disk use bytes per host, network bytes per host, and so on. So just the ability to get dashboards that give me a lot of this data right off the bat. And I don't even have to do anything. I don't have to learn how to create queries. I don't have to learn how to build a lot of this stuff because most of the answers for what I'm looking for are already in these apps. So again, similar to yesterday, if there's anything that you take from this call is start with apps. First actually start with something that your peers might have created already because they probably already installed the app and tweaked it to your needs. And if nobody has, then look at the apps yourself and see what is in there that you can take advantage of as well. Okay, so we have out-of-the-box content for metrics, but since I haven't even showed you anything around metrics, let me just show you how to build some of this stuff as well. I'm going to go to the training instance, and actually, again, I'm just going to go to the labs, and let's try some of the labs metrics and some of the labs for metrics in here. So I'm going to create this one. I'm going to create a metric that shows me all my bookings. So it's saying for anything that is of type bookings and bring in the metric called success.count. So let's do exactly that. I'm going to go into my instance. I'm going to this time open a, go to the home tab. And this time I'm going to open instead of a new log search, I'm going to open a metric search. So I go to open the metric, and you notice that the UI is slightly different. Expect the logs UI to start looking similar to this one. But in short, we're going to say where type, and you notice how it starts helping me with this stuff, right? I can choose where type equals, and I want bookings and metric. And you notice again, it's helping me with the tags as I type along. Success count. So I'm going to search for these ones in here and hit return. And what that's going to show me is my count of successful metrics for the last 15 minutes. I can choose a different time frame if I wanted to. How about the last 60 minutes? And run that. Right, there it is. So I was having slow, and then all of a sudden I had a peak in stuff. You could say that the day hadn't really started, and then all of a sudden the day started and people started booking in this. So that's kind of what I could come up with when I look at this graph. Also, you could do a couple of things here. You can play with the settings. Perhaps you want to change the color of this stuff. Maybe I want to go with blue. Or maybe I want to change the chart type to be an area instead of just a line. Maybe I want to change these, couple of things here. You can play stacked and so on and so forth, right? All right. From the left axis, you can change labels, you can change scales, you can see the legend. So this is showing me, because remember, metrics are time series, right? So there's where the data is coming from, or think of it as the metadata for this metric, I can see all that stuff. It's in the training namespace, is for the travel checkout, for the pod travel checkout, for this particular region, for this particular type, and so on. So depending on where your data is coming from, you'd have different metadata for that kind of stuff as well. Okay, let's go back to the query. Let's do the same thing, but let's look for the failed count. So again, I'm going to go type equals booking. Type equals booking. And in this case, I'm going to look for metric equals fail count and choose that one. And with that, I'm going to run the same exact query. And oh, interesting, look at this. What this is showing me is, I'm not sure why it's showing me in such a funky way. So let me just run this again. But clearly, something was going on in terms of fails. And remember that we were seeing that we could see that there weren't that many bookings, and then all of a sudden we started having a lot of bookings in there. It's probably because I was having a lot of failed bookings. What I don't know is why this is looking a little odd here. I don't know if this is a little bit of a UI issue right now. Let me just check and refresh this. But it's actually giving me 3 lines, and I'm not sure exactly. Oh, I see. It's because I have a few hosts that it's showing me that for. Okay, that's fair. I have a couple of hosts that it's showing me that for, so that's why it's showing me 2 different lines. Source host 100, and sorry that I'm trying to troubleshoot here as we go through, but that's all right. This demo has a couple of different hosts that are sending data. So what you're seeing here is this blue line is showing me success count from one host, and this one is showing me from a different host, and this is showing me failed counts from one host, and this is showing me failed counts from a different host. I could even say average by host so that I don't see that situation, but you get the point. That the idea here is that it's showing me fail counts versus success counts. I could even do things like, by the way, this first line is the A and this one's the B. The third line would be the C. So I could do stuff like pound A, pound. You notice how as soon as I put the pound, it gives me the letters. So I could say pound A minus pound B, and create a new C and do whatever calculations I want to do with that kind of stuff. And notice, metrics have their own operators as well, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you can do. The same, you can average, you can min, max, the basic ones as well. You can time shift to look at all different times. Again, I won't have time to show you all of these, but if you try the labs themselves, the labs will walk you through, here's one using time shift, here's one using delta, here's one using rate, so you can try out some of the metrics examples in here as well. The last thing that I want to show you is, let me go back to my query. You guys remember from the demo, but I think it's worth mentioning that you have the ability to show logs overlaid on metrics. So I can run a logs query here, and I can say, show me everything that has a source category of training travel checkout, for example, and show me the logs for that. So I can go here, and what it's going to do is, the way that it's going to represent them is, it's showing you up here a count of logs that it's seeing for that particular message, for that particular time period. The darker the squared, like say in here, the darker the squared, then the more messages I had in that particular time. So I could even say, I only want to see the words, the messages that have the word error in it. And as you would expect in this particular case, whenever I had some fail counts, that's when I was seeing the most number of errors. As a matter of fact, here, there are absolutely no messages with the word error. And from here, I can either click on a little square, which would show me all the different errors in here, and I could go and look at them, or I can shift click, and what shift click is going to allow me to do is going to take me to the log screen that you're now familiar with, and I can do all the fancy analytics that I was doing before to show you what I can do with that kind of stuff, right? All right, pretty good. I see no questions, so I'm assuming a lot of this stuff is making sense to you guys. So I've shown you how to start analyzing with your logs, how to start analyzing with your metrics. I talked a little bit about metric overlay, so the ability to show your metrics right over the same time frame as your logs, or your logs right at the same time as your metrics, to identify the what and the why, right? Logs really give you that why itself. Again, I can't stress enough, try these hands-on labs, because that's really what's going to give you a good sense for how this data works and how you can actually make it worth it. All right, the last ones. I'm going to talk about dashboards and alerts. Dashboards is pretty straightforward. I think we talked about this yesterday. And I mean, if there's anything I should add around dashboards is the ability to share. You should share as much as possible. So let me just create another dashboard kind of from scratch in here. I'm going to take, let's say, this query here, and I'm going to say add to dashboard. Actually, yesterday, I believe I created a dashboard called Apache Access Dash. Did I call one? Yeah, there we go. So yesterday I created this dashboard, and I'm just going to add this new one to that dashboard itself. All right. So if you notice, it's adding it right here as the predict. So I've got this dashboard that I created yesterday that has 4 different data panels. It has some text panels. Remember, I created a title and I created a text panel in here. How to do that? You go here and you just click on add a panel, and that allows you to create a title or a text panel to do in here, right? To add here. All right. So here's a dashboard that I have. Creating that dashboard is pretty straightforward. It's as simple as if I wanted to add another panel to this dashboard, I would just go find the data that I want. Let's say that I wanted to create a donut out of that. Click add to dashboard. Give the name of the dashboard that I'm looking for. Give the panel a name, and click on add. And as easy as that, I can start adding stuff to it. So here you go. Here's that donut example. Let's make this one a little smaller so that I can put that donut in there. Okay, and let's squeeze this little donut in here. All right, there you go. So as simple as that, I just added 2 more panels to a dashboard. So creating the dashboard is pretty straightforward. There are other things that you can do. I'm going to show you that are fairly easy. I'm going to show you 2 that are the interesting ones. One is when you're still in editing mode. Notice I was the creator of this message. So in reality, only I can make changes to this because I own it. I'm going to show you how to share it so that multiple people can make changes to this dashboard, or that multiple people can view this dashboard as well. But before I do that, I'm going to show you one last thing that I want to put in here. When you're in editing mode, if you click on this little cogwheel, which all of these have, you can from here change what you want this thing to look like as well. You can also these are all the things that you were able to play with before. But the only one that is different is if you go to General and you go down here at the bottom, you're actually able to link this panel to another dashboard. So for example, if I do that, when someone clicks on this dashboard, it's actually going to take them to this other dashboard in here. So that is pretty useful when you want to, you kind of want to allow people to be able to drill into a little more detail of something, right? To the ability to link dashboards. Okay, but what I really wanted to talk to, the last thing I really want to talk about dashboards is the ability to share dashboards. So right now, this dashboard is not shared, only I can see it. But what I would want to do is I would want to share this dashboard. And there's a few things that I can do. I can share this dashboard with my entire organization. And in that case, everybody can see it. I can choose the access that I want. I want to allow everybody to view it, for example, right? But I only want to allow a certain number of people or a specific role to be able to edit it. So I can say, okay, so these guys are going to be able to view it, but only analysts or only training analysts will have the ability to edit that dashboard itself. Right, so you notice how I'm saying some people can edit it, but everybody else can view it. And the reason for that is because we want to collaborate. We all want to be able to have a say on that dashboard and build it. goes a little bit further. I have some advanced options. Remember, I am the owner, so I can manage it, not just edit it. I can manage it. And what that means is I can also delete it, right? If I were to give these guys manage access, that means that they can also delete it, which is not cool. So I really want to only allow them to edit it because I want to manage it. But under these advanced options, I can let them grant view access to other people. I can let these training analysts grant edit and view access to other people, or I cannot let them grant access at all. They can just edit it, and I will take care of all the granting of accesses for this kind of stuff as well. So a couple of other options you can do in here. Right? So if you're happy with what you have, you can notify those people with an email. And so they will get access saying, hey, listen, Mario just shared Apache Access Dashboard with you. You now have edit access, or you now have view access to that kind of stuff. I don't want to spam people, so I will say no. And then all I have to do is click on save, and I will have effectively shared that stuff with those people. Right. All right. Let me go back into that sharing mode because I want to show you a couple more things that you can do. So now you notice I manage it, but my entire organization can view it. And then anybody with a role of training analyst has the ability to edit this dashboard. I can take away that, or I can edit those things in here. All right. The other thing that I can do is at the bottom, I can do a little bit of more sharing. I can say, listen, make this dashboard available to anybody outside of the organization. So all I have to do is share with them this URL and turn this thing on, and anyone outside of the organization does not even need a Sumo Logic logon. They can view this dashboard from outside. It's a little dangerous if your data is sensitive. So most likely than not, what you will want to do is this bottom one, which is, yes, I want to make this dashboard accessible to certain people that don't have a Sumo logon, but I'm going to whitelist the people that I want to give access to. Let's say that your VPs, 2 or 3 or 5 of your VPs need access to some reports. You can whitelist their IP addresses, and they will get access to that kind of stuff. All right. And then the last two are pretty self-explanatory. You can share dashboards. Let's say that you play with a dashboard, you apply a filter. You can share those dashboards with those applied filters. Or you can, let's say that you change the time range on a dashboard. You can share it with that particular dashboard in there. All right. I think I failed to mention that if you do notify recipients by email, you can even add a note on that email. Saying, listen, I'm sharing this with you because I want you to follow up on X, Y, and Z. All right. So dashboards, pretty useful. You want to put them out there. You want to make sure that that you're sharing. And sharing is caring. That's I can't stress enough how much you should, when you create something, share with others, because it's going to benefit quite a few other people as well. All right. The last thing I want to talk about is alerts. So creating alerts, for those of you who are on the call yesterday, it's super, super simple. But what I want to talk about today is how to create what we call meaningful alerts. So let me go back to just showing you how to create alerts because it's pretty easy. I'm going to just go to a query here. Let me see if I can find a query that I can reuse for searching alerts. Oh yeah, let me use this Outlier one in here. Okay, so what if I wanted to notify or alert someone if there is an outlier, meaning there is a little pink triangle there, and I notify someone when that little pink triangle appears. Let me choose a slightly bigger time frame here. Okay, that's good. All right, so you notice there's 3 different pink triangles, and I want to alert on that. So the way that you would do that is, if you go to the table view, you'll notice that anytime that there is a pink triangle, you have a 1 here under error count violation. So what I can do is I can just keep an eye on that. Oops, I keep an eye on that field in there. I'm not sure why it's copying everything. I just want to copy this one. Well, I'm just gonna type it. It's hard when you don't have your mouse. Where error count violation is greater than 0. So if I ever have an error count violation that is greater than 0, that means that I have an outlier, right? If it doesn't produce any results, that means that I don't have outliers. I thought I did, but maybe it was a different time frame. Let's just choose, a threshold of 4, a threshold of 2. Okay. So there we go. In this case, I do have some violations. These outliers are showing me that the fact that I have results means that I have violations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save my query. And part of saving my query down here at the bottom left allows me to schedule this query, to schedule this search to run on a regular basis. So I can say, okay, I want the search to run every 15 minutes, every hour, every 2 hours, daily, or you can even set up your own custom cron job to run on a very specific time frames. I could even say real time, in which case it will run, I think it's every 2 or 3 seconds. It's pinging, but let's keep it simple. I'm going to run every hour, and you can specify which time zone you want to run in, all that good stuff. And then when do you want it to notify you? Do you want it to notify you every time it runs, or do you want to notify you if the following condition is met? So in this case, the condition is my number of results. If I get 0 results, then that means I have no alerts. I have no nothing outside of my standard deviations. But if I ever have my number of results be greater than 0, then this is an alert I want to tackle. I can email the alert. I covered these yesterday. I can create a script action, which means I can create a custom script that does something. And Sumo Logic doesn't care what it is. All it knows is where that script is found and what's it written on. Is it Python? Is it Perl? Is it a C shell script? And it's going to go and run that script, right? I can save the results to index, meaning put them back into just a small index so that I can look at them later on. Or I could even create a connection to a webhook. Perhaps I want to send it to Slack or PagerDuty, right? I put here my connection to Slack, and this is going to be able to send it. And I can even customize that payload, right? I can say it's going to be the Sumo Logic bot. So you can customize what that payload is going to look like and what you want to put in there. And you have some variables, and our documentation is pretty good about the variables that you can add in there. All right. Okay. So creating the alert is super simple. But what I want to talk about in this last 10 minutes is how to create good, meaningful alerts. And I'm going to do that by opening 3 alert examples. So let me go back to the library. Let me go back to, I'm going to go here. Actually, I'm sorry, library. I'm going to go to training. I'm going to go to alerts. And I'm going to open 3 examples in here. I'm going to open a good one, a better one, and the best one, if you will. So let me start with the good one. So the good one is this one. Let's say that we wanted to create an alert that just tells us if we have too many 404s, right? Pretty straightforward. All that I would do is I would say, all right, show me only those messages with 404, time slice it, then count by time slice, and then if my count is ever bigger than, let's say, 200, then let me know. And, let's say 250. That might be a little more interesting. All right. If my count is ever above 250, let me know. In this case, I do have counts greater than 250, and therefore I can set up an alert. If I ever have results for this, I want to be notified. But as you notice, this is not rock. This wasn't the best one, and the reason for that is because I'm hard coding a limit. I'm hard coding that threshold, and even now that I was trying to figure out the example, I have to sort of guesstimate what that threshold should be, right? So a better result or a better alert is using Outlier. In the case of Outlier, what I'm doing is I'm looking at history. I'm looking at past data to figure out what the threshold should be going forward. And if my past data or my current data seems like pretty high compared to my past data, then I'm going to have a little triangle outside of that threshold, and you know the drill now. You do a where count is greater than violation, right? Because remember that violation is going to be set to 1, and then you can build yourself an alert off of that thing. All right, let me show you the third one and the best one. And by the way, this example that I'm showing you is for 404s in Apache Access, but this could be anything. You could be doing this in your own custom app. You could be looking at errors. You could be looking at event codes. This could be just about any data. I'm just showing you an example or a template of this kind of stuff. So look at this one. What I'm doing here is I'm saying, great, I want to look at 404s. But looking at 404s on their own is not all that great. I'm going to look at it in the context of 200s, meaning if my 404s spike but my 200s don't, then that is worrying. If my 200s spike and my 400s spike as well, that's not all that interesting, because that just is statistically I have more traffic and therefore I have more 404s, right? Okay, so I look at all my traffic and I look at my 404s, and then I have this if statement saying, if my status code is 200, by the way, this could be like this as well, right? If status code equals 200, I was just trying to show you examples of the matches as well, right? Equals 404. Okay, here we go. So if status code equals 200, then create a field called successes that has 1s and 0s, and a fail that has 1s and 0s. And then I can sum those up. Since it's a whole bunch of sums at 1s and 0s, sum up all the 1s and store that in a field called success count. And sum up all the fails and store that in a field called fail counts. And by the way, I'm doing this on a time slice basis. So I'm still keeping that time slice idea so I can see a trend over time. Here's where it gets interesting. Then I create a new field called failure rate that is dividing my number of fails by my number of successes. So I'm kind of trying to ratio them and try to find out how many failures do I have against the number of successes. Does my failure count rise much quicker than my success count? That's really what I'm looking at, right? So that I can see if there's a disparity there. And then I do an outlier on that new field. I'm actually pulling off an outlier on the failure rate count. Again, I have my window, threshold, and all that good stuff. Let's run this thing and then let's see what that looks like. Might be a bit of a flat line, but let's see. So what this does is it looks at my success count, it looks at my fail count, it creates a failure rate which goes between 0.05 and, I don't know, 0.04, it looks like. Doesn't have much variation, so that's kind of good. That means I'm not getting a whole bunch of fail counts. And then it creates all those statistical numbers off of the failure rate. And what that allows me to do is not a lot of variation here. But what this is doing is it's actually looking at how at the rate of change of my 404s against my 200s. You can edit this thing here. You can change the axis. Let's see, 0.1 to, I don't know, 0.01. I don't know where that's going to be. Oh, sorry, I did it the other way around. Actually, let's find out what that looks. Yeah, there you go. All right, so that looks a little bit better. And essentially what this is saying is, listen, the rate of change between the two doesn't vary all that much. It's within the threshold. But here there is a case where your 404s went up at a much higher rate than your 200s. So that might be a little bit more meaningful. So what this is doing is this third alert is it's kind of removing the false positives. It's really only alerting you when your increase in your 404s happens and there really isn't an increase in 200s for the other ones as well. All right. With that said, a lot of you might be thinking, oh man, this is great. How do I get a copy of that particular query? Because that's pretty useful. I want to point out that if you go back to this Learn tab in here in the UI, we have our community. And in our community, we've started, as most of you know, community is just a forums for posting questions and getting answers. But we have in here something called the query library. And the query library is pretty cool because what people have been doing here is posting a lot of queries that can be used as templates for any other stuff. As a matter of fact, let's see if that one, I think it's one of the first ones that we started putting out there. I don't know if I can find, oh, actually, let me just search for it, Outlier. How to compare, how to ratios, how to create ratios and percentages, creating, oh, look at this one, creating meaningful alerts. This looks pretty meaningful. There it is, that same exact query that I was building for you. And to prove my point, here at the bottom is that same query, but kind of just made generic for any other data source, right? So what if you wanted to find, you wanted to track the percentage of errors that you're getting in your own app, in your own code itself? You could do something like that as well. So I would highly, highly recommend, when you get a chance, check out this forums. If you have a question, post your questions here. You get answers not just from Sumo people, but from all other users, which is great because they also have a context of what you guys are looking at. And then with that said, I have, again, pointing you to the lab, but these use cases, you notice that these are links. These are actual links to the community itself. So if you want to, from an outlier perspective, if you want to create an alert on ratios or percentages, you would use the outlier operator. If you want to do a compare and alert on historical data, you would use the compare and the outlier operator. And all these show you exactly how to do it. So if I click on one of those, it takes me to the article. It shows me which operator it's using. It has screenshots of how to do that kind of stuff exactly in your instance. So don't worry about the fact that it might be with Apache Access data, that it might be for something. More often than not, I would say 99% of the time, you can take a query that exists for some source data and just tweak it for your specific needs and be able to use that kind of query as well. Okay, let me pause there. Like I showed you yesterday, where do we go from here? My recommendation to you is check out the Learn tab. Learn tab has videos. Learn tab has tutorials. Our documentation is here. You can send, you can open a support ticket through here as well. You can get to training. Probably more interesting is try the labs. Definitely try the labs. These are going to give you good, solid ground to know how to do it. What I see most customers do is they try the labs in our generic environment, and then they try those same queries in their own environment with their data. They just tweak the source category, right? Grab these same things, tweak the source category so that it works in your environment, and you should be able to do it. And then the last thing that I would say is get certified. Once you go through the labs, you will be surprised how much you know. Go to certification, and you can literally start the exam right off of here. Once you go through this webinar, you try the hands-on labs, take the exam, and that should get you well on your way to good knowledge around Sumo. Right? That would be level 2 that it prepares you. So with that said, let me pause here for just a second. I'm going to stop the recording and let me know if you guys have any questions.